So let me go ahead and start real quick. And people ask me, what's digitalization? And so let me tell you a story. We'll start off this way, and then we'll kind of get into the slide presentation. About 8 months ago, I was asked to go to a fish packing plant. And I was met by the CFO and the CEO, and they took me in and they showed me a video. And the video showed an assembly line that went down through the middle of the factory floor that was a conveyor belt. And there's about 400 people, and just imagine this in your mind, dressed in white smocks with hair nets on, rubber gloves, and they stood at the side of this conveyor line with fillet knives, and they were filleting fish by hand as these fillets would go, or fish would go down the assembly line. And they were skilled, they'd been there for many, many years, and they had cut the bones out of the fish, and they would dispose of the bones in this little trash chute that they have at each one of these stations. Then the CFO and CEO said, now Scott, I'm going to take you in and I'm going to show you the new factory floor. So the first thing I noticed was the conveyor was moving much quicker. Then I also noticed there was all kinds of technology that was with this fish packing plant. There was cameras that were in the ceiling. They had water knives that came down to actually fillet the fish. And then I realized, I had the stunning realization, there was not one person on that factory floor. So there's two sides to digitalization, and this is a key point for everybody to understand, that by 2030, there'll be 2 billion jobs that will go away. But on the other side of the coin, currently 73% of all CEOs see a lack of specific skills. What's interesting, the entrepreneurs in this auditorium, you have those specific skills. You're the data scientists, you're the mathematicians, you're the physicists, you're the folks that understand big data, you're the folks that understand analytics, blockchain. So the future of work is actually going to be in these very highly paid technical types of jobs. And it actually feeds itself into this whole other story that we've had about entrepreneurship. So this is where the market's going to, this is what's happening in digitalization. So let me pause here and kind of introduce myself. About 30 years ago, I started my second career. So I actually went into management consulting and high tech. And I had the privilege of working throughout the world, through the Middle East, in Singapore, in Korea. And I finished up with SAP in Singapore after 7 years. Then I had the opportunity to retire. So I actually retired from SAP, and I was home for 3 days, and my wife's a PhD, she studies everything. She quickly came to me and she says, baby, you got to go get a job. And so what's funny about this, it was the greatest thing that ever happened to me, because I actually got to go help about 6 startup companies over the next 2 years to actually find funding, to write the business cases, to look at the operational side, to understand how entrepreneurs actually get funded and what makes projects go. So I'm very pleased to say I had one company actually go public. I've had 2 or 3 companies now in C round funding. They're actually in the final stages. And then I have a couple other companies that have actually were headquartered in New York and were here in Hong Kong. They were in fintech. So it was a very interesting process that I went through. In April, I rejoined SAP. So now I get to bring this knowledge back to SAP and back to our customer base. But what we're starting to see, these are the exact questions I was answering 2 years ago that you're asking me today on stage, okay? So let's talk about the customer experience. I'm going to go through a series of slides that kind of frame up the situation about digital, and then we're going to actually end the presentation. There's 3 parts about reimagine business processes, reimagine the business model, reimagine work. And then finally, there's 3 key drivers I feel specifically in this geographical area that we would want to come back and talk about at the end of the presentation. So here's some alarming statistics. You know, I didn't get my first cell phone until I think I was about 35 years old, maybe even older than that. It was a big brick and it was like $6,000. Now, 90% of the population in the world over the age of 6 will actually have a telephone, a mobile device, by 2020. So the mobile device has changed everything we've seen in the world. And about 70% of the consumers are more likely to have brand loyalty if it's easy to use. So I have a daughter that's 16 years old. If it's easy to use, she and her friends will continue to use that. So this may be a trait that we start to see about if there's an entrepreneur type of opportunity. If you have something that you're targeting a group of Gen Zs, they're looking at specific things that are really easy to use. And then we talked about supply chains. So this is another huge area that I often see growth in. In the digital supply chain, things are getting smaller and smaller. It's becoming very, the longer the value chain, we're starting to see a lot of transactions across the supply chain. So there's going to be about $1 trillion US in B2B business by 2020. So it's a huge amount of money that's actually being poured through just this one segment of the digitalization. And then you start to see this 30x growth in the shared economy by 2030. So you can see big pockets that will grow kind of at an exponential rate. And then Internet of Things, I cannot tell you, this has got to be one of the biggest things that will actually come to the market here in the next 4 or 5 years. But we're starting to see the Internet of Things, 2 billion devices will be connected. We're now seeing trains. Trenitalia is one of our customers that have Internet of Things devices, monitors on, so we can actually do predictive maintenance. I have a customer in China. They're a dairy. They're going to put Internet of Things like cow earrings on the cows to actually understand the health of the cow that's out in the feedlot. So the Internet of Things is pretty broad. If you can think about it, it can be attached on Internet of Things. And then the amount of data, and we talked about big data, dark data, about 400 trillion gigabytes of data will be produced by IT or Internet of Things devices by 2018. So you think about what the data scientists can do, what we can do with predictive analytics, predictive maintenance, predictive healthcare, what have you. It's going to come out of these big pools of data. So data is what's going to drive some of our market here. And then, you know, you ask about SAP, and people don't realize, but about 76% of all of the world's transactions will go across an SAP system sooner or later. So a lot of, we understand exactly what's happening in the world about the digital type transactions, the financial transactions. And you're right, 98% of the top industries actually use an SAP system. And then people keep thinking about SAP as an ERP company. We're transitioned, we're now a cloud company. So in 2015, we had over 2 billion euros worth of cloud subscriptions. So we've actually transitioned from an on-premise type platform to a cloud. And then SAP is transforming. And I think this is another thing that you start to, if we look internally to SAP, we start to realize that 43% of our workforce are millennials. So I think this is a target audience that we have here at the conference. So we're actually transforming as a company, but we're also seeing the marketplace transform to match this. And then we also see 30% of our new employees, it's their first job. So we're bringing in about 30% are brand new type of employees. And then the other part that is important, especially in high tech, you constantly have to reinvest in R&D. You constantly have to reinvest in new technology. So we have about 100 development centers throughout the world. We have about 23,000 employees working at those different centers in order to actually think about things like blockchain, predictive analytics, et cetera. Okay, and then we come back to this whole idea about reimagine. And we have published several white papers in regards to reimagine. But the reimagined business models, let me give you an example of this. Everybody has seen Uber or Airbnb. Those business models are a radical departure from the business models that we have today. So can you imagine being the CEO of, say, Hilton Hotels on Airbnb, if he's got Airbnb entering the market? Airbnb has as many hotel rooms as Hilton, but they don't own any of the hotel rooms, and they don't own any of the employees. The employees are not part of that organization. So they can quickly enter a market, and the bar to entry is much lower than it is for a capital-intensive type organization. Uber's the same way. Uber has more cars in the United States than all the other taxi companies. So now you can actually call up a ride, it's brokered, Uber takes 20 to 25%, and the drivers are paid once a week. And it's a completely radical business model change. If we go to business processes, I'm a manufacturer. I came from the supply chain area. And we used to have a thing called S&OP practices, sales and operations planning. And it used to be where a vice president would come in with a giant printout, and it took a week for it to run. It took that long to run, and they ran in different systems. So someone ran one for manufacturing, one ran for supply chain, one ran one for marketing or sales. And you would actually go in a room and you argue for an hour, and you try to figure out what the most optimal plan is. And you only could do it once a week because it took so long to run. Now I can run the plan 4 or 5 times in an hour on the new technology, and I get an optimal plan. So if I wanted to replan, I could replan every day. So the business models have changed, and the cycle times have compressed. And then the final thing is about reimagine work. We're finding a lot of the millennials, a lot of the Gen Y, Gen Z, if they want to do it on their mobile device. They want to approve expense reports on their mobile device. They want to talk into the phone and put an expense report in. They want to be able to actually look at performance on a telephone or an iPad. So reimagine work has taken on this whole life cycle. So these are the things that we're concentrating on, the big buckets about what we look at. And then finally, and this is just an astounding fact, and this is where it's so exciting to be in Hong Kong right now, is that by 2025, all companies with revenues over $1 billion, half of them will be headquartered in China. Okay, so you start to realize everything is migrating towards Asia, to China, to Hong Kong. And it's pretty exciting to see this massive shift on a global type scale. And how is it happening? One Belt, One Road. We're watching more outbound acquisitions in China than ever before, and they're huge acquisitions. Made in China 2025, this is with the internet, Industry 4.0, and it all has to do with business process changes, and then the Internet++, and we've heard about that already this morning. So with that, I just kind of like to leave you. We have a model, run live, run simple, and I actually believe that as you start up these startups, I again think that we should run live, run simple. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, please take it. Talking about transformation, I really I would like to ask you one question that as such a matured company like SAP, how do you keep innovative, or how do you keep your company be so energetic to reinventing so many new things?
Yeah, I think it has to do with our leadership. Our leadership is very much in tune with this. Our chairman, Hasso Plattner, was a professor at Stanford University. Mm-hmm. He's funded many different operations about design thinking. And then if we don't innovate, we'll die. And it's like any other big business. So you have to get on with the cloud. You have to get on with predictive. You have to get on with big data. It's the only way that you'll survive in the marketplace.
Okay, I see. May I ask you one more question for more personal one?
Sure.
I know that you travel a lot, and you are not only traveling, but you also stay in so many different countries for working for a period of time. What do you think of Hong Kong? Will you keep maybe spend your rest of life in Hong Kong to work here?
I would love to. I find it's very efficient, very easy to get around. There's a lot of energy here. I think there's huge opportunities, and you know, I would love to kind of continue to stay and work with companies as long as Hong Kong will have me.
Yeah, that would be a pleasure to have you here, to inspire more youth and inspire more entrepreneurs here. Yeah, thank you very much.